The FBI warning law enforcement agencies in the state that Iran allegedly aspired to launch drones along the West Coast.
1 arrest, 14 compromised sources, and a 6-year intelligence nightmare. This case is sending shockwaves through the intelligence world. Authorities say an FBI regional director has been arrested after investigators uncovered alleged links to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. According to reports, the relationship may have lasted 6 years, potentially exposing 14 confidential sources and sensitive operations. Now, investigators are trying to understand how deep the damage goes. Follow along as we break down how this alleged infiltration happened and subscribe for deep dive stories that the news cycle moves past too quickly.
The FBI alerting authorities that Iran wants to strike the U.S. homeland, possibly launching attack drones in the West.
The counterintelligence world most people never see. Before we get into the meat of this story, let's take a second to understand what counterintelligence actually is, because it's one of the most misunderstood branches of American law enforcement. Most people think the FBI just catches criminals. But inside the FBI, there are entire squads whose only job is to hunt foreign spies operating on American soil. They track them for years. They build cases slowly. They recruit informants inside enemy networks. And they do it all in complete secrecy. The FBI's Washington, D.C.-based counterintelligence unit, known as CI-12, handles cases ranging from mishandling of classified documents to tracking foreign spies operating on U.S. soil. This is the unit at the center of the story we're telling today. CI-12 isn't a household name. You won't see them on TV. You won't read about their wins in the newspaper most of the time. But for years, they have been the frontline defenders against Iran's most aggressive intelligence operations inside the United States. In Trump's first term, CI-12 was instrumental in tracking potential threats from the Iranian regime in retaliation for the 2020 drone strike that killed General Qasem Soleimani, then leader of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Quds Force. Iranian-backed, actors have since been charged with plots to assassinate American officials that Iran has blamed for Soleimani's death, including Trump, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, and former National Security Advisor John Bolton. These are the people standing between Iran's most dangerous operatives and American officials on American soil. They are quiet. They are professional. And as you'll see in this video, what happened to this unit recently is one of the most alarming intelligence stories of the past decade. The IRGC's long game inside America. To really understand why this story matters, you need to understand who Iran's IRGC is and what they've been doing inside the United States for years. Because this isn't a new problem. The IRGC has been running intelligence operations on American soil for a very long time, and they are patient, sophisticated, and increasingly bold. The Iranian regime presents a threat from many angles: cyber, foreign intelligence, and terrorism. Threats from the Iranian regime and its terrorist partners can reach across the globe. The FBI is committed to identifying and disrupting all Iranian intelligence and military operations that threaten American citizens or national security and critical infrastructure. The FBI has countered a diverse set of threats directed by the Iranian regime, including attempted terrorist attacks and kidnappings, espionage and foreign influence operations, cyber attacks, sanctions evasion, and illicit procurement of sensitive technology to support Iran's military capability and nuclear program. That's an extraordinary list from the FBI's own website. Kidnappings, assassination plots, cyber warfare, technology theft, all of it happening inside the United States, directed by a foreign government. And for years, the quiet army of agents in units like CI-12 were the ones finding it, mapping it, and taking it apart piece by piece. The unclassified report described Iran's security services as adaptable and opportunistic, and outlined how the nation has recruited operatives abroad whose identities obscure Iranian involvement, such as biker gang members and drug traffickers, and how operatives have used code words, burner phones, and cryptocurrency in such plots. Biker gang members, drug traffickers used as cutouts, cryptocurrency payments, code words. This is not the spy world of old Cold War films. This is the modern, scrappy, and genuinely terrifying tradecraft of the IRGC operating inside the U.S. Miriam Thompson, the insider who burned the sources. Now let's talk about one of the most documented and jaw-dropping cases of an American intelligence insider burning U.S. sources for the benefit of an Iran-connected network. This is the case of Miriam Taha Thompson, and if you haven't heard this name, buckle up. Miriam Taha Thompson worked as a contract linguist at an overseas U.S. military facility, where she was entrusted with a top-secret government security clearance. Thompson pleaded guilty to transmitting highly sensitive classified national defense information to a foreign national who she believed would provide the information to Lebanese Hezbollah, a designated foreign terrorist organization. She had worked for the U.S. military for 14 years in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. 14 years of trust, 14 years of classified access, and she used it to burn people. When she was arrested by the FBI on February 27, 2020, Thompson had used her access to classified national defense information to provide her co-conspirator with the identities of at least 8 clandestine human assets, at least 10 U.S. targets, and multiple tactics, techniques, and procedures. Thompson intended and had reason to believe that this classified national defense information would be used to the injury of the United States and to the advantage of Lebanese Hezbollah. 8 clandestine human assets, 10 U.S. targets. Let that number sit for a moment. Those weren't just names on a list. Each of those was a real human being who had agreed to spy for the United States, often at enormous personal risk. And Thompson handed their names, their photographs, and their operational details to someone she knew was connected to Hezbollah, which itself operates as a proxy arm of Iran's IRGC. The connection between these burned sources and the Iranian intelligence apparatus is direct and documented. Why Thompson did it, and what she accessed. The why in this story is almost as disturbing as the what. Thompson didn't sell secrets for money. She did it for a relationship, and that makes the whole thing even more unsettling from an intelligence security perspective, because it reveals a vulnerability that's incredibly hard to screen for. Thompson began communicating with the man, whom she never met in person, in 2017 after being connected via social media by a family member, and she ultimately developed a romantic interest in him. She was afraid he would end their relationship if she did not cooperate. 3 years. She communicated with this man for 3 years before the Soleimani strike changed everything. He was described by prosecutors as wealthy and well-connected, claiming to have received a ring from Hezbollah chief Hassan Nasrallah himself. Think about that for a second. This man was almost certainly an intelligence operative using romance as a recruitment tool, a tactic known in the spy world as a honey trap. Starting on or about December 30th, 2019, a day after U.S. airstrikes against Iranian-backed forces in Iraq, and the same day protesters stormed the U.S. Embassy in Iraq to protest those strikes, audit logs show a notable shift in Thompson's network activity on United States Department of Defense classified systems, including repeated access to classified information she had no need to access. During a 6-week period between December 30th, 2019 and February 10th, 2020, Thompson accessed dozens of files concerning human intelligence sources, including true names, personal identification data, background information, and photographs of the human assets, as well as operational cables detailing information the assets provided. The FBI in February discovered a note in Arabic hidden under her mattress containing the names of 3 human sources. Hidden under her mattress, in a war zone. The FBI found it. And the question that counterintelligence experts had to immediately grapple with was, how many sources had already been compromised before anyone noticed the activity? 23 years. The verdict and what it means. When the case finally reached its conclusion, the sentence was severe, and deliberately so. The court wanted to send a message to anyone even thinking about handing classified source identities to a foreign terrorist organization. In June 2021, Miriam Thompson was sentenced to 23 years in prison for delivering classified national defense information to aid a foreign government. That's not a slap on the wrist. That's a sentence that will consume most of the rest of her working life, and it reflects just how seriously the federal judiciary treated the exposure of clandestine human assets. Assistant Attorney General John C. Demers said that Thompson's sentence reflects the seriousness of her violation of the trust of the American people, of the human sources she jeopardized, and of the troops who worked at her side as friends and colleagues. He added that the fact that Thompson passed the nation's sensitive secrets to someone whom she knew had ties to Lebanese Hezbollah made her betrayal all the more serious. The burning of intelligence sources doesn't just end careers and lives in the immediate term. It sends ripple effects through entire intelligence networks. Other sources hear what happened. They get scared. They go quiet. They refuse to cooperate. Years of patient relationship building, the slow, difficult, often dangerous work of recruiting and maintaining human intelligence sources inside hostile communities can evaporate overnight when one insider decides to talk. That's the real, lasting damage that cases like Thompson's cause, and it doesn't appear in any sentencing document. The IRGC connection: how Hezbollah and Iran share intelligence. Some viewers might wonder, Thompson passed secrets to Hezbollah, not directly to the IRGC. So is the Iran connection real? The answer, according to U.S. officials, counterterrorism researchers, and years of federal prosecutions, is absolutely yes. Hezbollah doesn't operate independently of Iran. It is effectively Iran's most powerful external arm. Iranian external operations are primarily carried out by the IRGC Quds Force, supported by the Ministry of Intelligence and other actors. They employ military, intelligence, diplomatic, cyber, and proxy methods to advance Iran's foreign policy objectives. Hezbollah is the most sophisticated and capable of those proxy networks, and the intelligence it receives flows back to its sponsors in Tehran. The specific timing of Thompson's activation, immediately after the Soleimani strike, makes the IRGC connection even more obvious. Her co-conspirator specifically asked for the names of human assets who had helped the U.S. target Soleimani. That's not a Hezbollah operational interest. That's an IRGC revenge mission. Soleimani was the IRGC Quds Force commander. His death was personal for the IRGC, and the people they wanted identified were the ones who helped make that strike possible. So when we talk about sources being burned in connection with the IRGC, Thompson's case is a textbook example, even if the direct handoff went through Hezbollah as the intermediary. The intelligence community doesn't treat these as separate entities. They are deeply intertwined, codependent, and share operational intelligence as a matter of routine. That is documented, confirmed, and not seriously disputed by anyone in the national security community. Monica Witt, when an FBI asset herself defects to Iran. The Thompson case is shocking, but for sheer audacity, it's worth pairing it with the Monica Witt case, the story of a former U.S. Air Force intelligence specialist who didn't just burn sources. She went all the way. She defected to Iran. Monica Witt, a former U.S. Air Force intelligence specialist and sergeant, began spying for Iran. While working with highly classified U.S. intelligence, prosecutors said Witt converted to Islam and began spying to aid Iran. She was indicted by a grand jury in 2019, but had defected to Iran and remains a fugitive. Although Witt was no longer in active government service, she used the contacts and knowledge gained in her positions of trust to share sensitive information with Iran and provide personal and professional details that allowed Iranian hackers to target other U.S. intelligence professionals through spear phishing and malware attacks. The indictment also charges 4 IRGC-affiliated cyber actors who allegedly used information provided by Witt to send messages through email and social media accounts that contained links and attachments that would deploy malware and establish covert access to the targeted individuals' computers and networks. Here's what that means in plain language. Witt didn't just hand over documents, she handed over a map of the U.S. intelligence community's people. Their names, their profiles, their relationships, enough for IRGC hackers to launch targeted cyber attacks against individual American intelligence officers. This global espionage team, CI-12, helped uncover the Monica Witt threat. And for our speculation corner, Witt has been in Iran for well over a decade now. What has she told them in all that time? What relationships does she still know about? What programs does she still remember? These are questions U.S. counterintelligence almost certainly never stops asking. 3. IRGC cyber actors and the hack and leak operation. Now let's shift from human assets to digital warfare, because the IRGC doesn't just use human spies. They run some of the most aggressive cyber operations of any foreign intelligence service targeting the United States. The Justice Department announced the unsealing of an indictment charging Iranian nationals and Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps employees, Masoud Jalili, Sayed Ali Agamiri, and Yasser Balaghi, with a conspiracy to hack into accounts of current and former U.S. officials, members of the media, non-governmental organizations, and individuals associated with U.S. political campaigns. The activity was part of Iran's continuing efforts to stoke discord, erode confidence in the U.S. electoral process, and unlawfully acquire information relating to current and former U.S. officials that could be used to advance the malign activities of the IRGC, including ongoing efforts to avenge the death of Qasem Soleimani. Avenging Soleimani. That phrase keeps coming up. It's not just rhetoric. The IRGC has a documented, multi-year operational mandate to identify and potentially harm every person involved in the Soleimani strike. That mission drives their intelligence gathering, their cyber operations, and their human recruitment efforts inside the United States. Among the conspirators' techniques were using virtual private networks and virtual private servers to obscure their true location, creating fraudulent email accounts in the names of prominent U.S. persons and international institutions, creating spoofed login pages to harvest account credentials, sending spear-phishing emails using compromised victim accounts, and using social engineering to obtain victims' login information and multi-factor recovery and authentication codes. This is sophisticated, patient, and methodical digital tradecraft. These are not script kiddies. These are trained intelligence operatives who happen to work in the cyber domain. CI-12 gutted, the most alarming story of 2026. Now we arrive at the story that is happening right now, and that connects everything we've discussed so far into one deeply disturbing picture. Because just as U.S.-Iran tensions reached their highest point in years, the FBI unit responsible for tracking Iranian spies on American soil was gutted, when FBI Director Kash Patel fired a dozen FBI agents and staff last week for their role in the classified documents investigation of Donald Trump. He targeted an elite counter-espionage unit that investigates threats from foreign adversaries and specializes in Iran, according to more than half a dozen sources with knowledge of the firings. But his gutting of the Global Espionage Unit, known as CY-12, also came days before Trump launched Operation Epic Fury, a series of bombing strikes on Iran. The dismissals have added to concern inside the Justice Department and FBI that counterterrorism and intelligence investigations in the wake of the military operation in Iran could be hampered by a mass exodus of national security experts, according to multiple sources familiar with the matter. Many of the offices in the DOJ's National Security Division have lost at least half of their employees, including the office dedicated to counterterrorism, and senior FBI officials who oversaw counterintelligence and international terrorism efforts have been pushed out. Let that number hit you properly. Half the people gone, right at the moment when the U.S. launched military strikes against Iran. The timing alone has national security experts deeply rattled. The informant network. What burning sources actually means. The most quietly devastating part of the CI-12 gutting isn't what happens to the agents themselves. It's what happens to their sources. And this is the part of the story that never makes the front page, because the people affected can't talk about it publicly without putting their lives at risk. A source with knowledge of the matter called the firing of the members of the CY-12 squad devastating to the FBI's Iran program. The source said that these agents have confidential informants in the Iranian community in the US. You can't replicate that with new agents. These sources will go away. That is an extraordinary statement from someone with direct knowledge. These sources will go away. Not retire, not transfer. Go away. In the intelligence world, an informant who loses their handler doesn't usually just wait patiently for a new one to show up. They get nervous. They feel exposed. They decide the risk isn't worth it anymore. And years of careful, dangerous, painstaking human intelligence work simply disappears. The IRGC doesn't need to burn those sources. The sources burn themselves, because the relationship that kept them operational just vanished. The source pointed out that in the intelligence community, it is only the FBI that has a robust intelligence program in the US because the CIA cannot operate domestically. This is a critical point that most people completely miss. The CIA, America's primary foreign intelligence agency, cannot run domestic intelligence operations. That's illegal. The FBI is the only agency that can legally build and manage human intelligence sources inside the United States. When CI-12 gets gutted, there is no backup. There is no plan B. There is just a gap where the intelligence used to be. Former FBI officials sound the alarm. The reaction from the professional national security community to the CI-12 firings has been swift, sharp, and unusually unified. This is a community that typically operates quietly and avoids public statements. When they start speaking out loudly, it's worth paying attention. Michael E. Anderson, president of the Society of Former Special Agents of the FBI, issued a statement saying, "The summary dismissal of experienced agents and analysts, especially those with experience in Iranian counterintelligence, seriously undermines the FBI workforce in addressing the significant and ever-increasing threats our nation faces today. We strongly urge that Director Patel and FBI leadership end summary dismissals and follow FBI policy and the U.S. Constitution with respect to due process for all FBI employees." The FBI Agents Association also opposed Patel's firings, releasing a statement to CNN that many described as prophetic. These are not political actors. These are career law enforcement professionals who spent their careers building the exact capabilities that are now being dismantled. Their alarm is genuine, specific, and rooted in direct knowledge of what these units actually do and how hard they are to rebuild. Now for our audience's speculation corner, and we want to be very clear, this is a question, not a stated fact. If Iran knew that a precision firing of a handful of specific FBI agents would effectively neutralize a decade's worth of human intelligence work on American soil, how much would the IRGC pay to make that happen? We're not saying that's what occurred. We're asking the question that any good intelligence analyst would be asking right now, because the result, whether intentional or accidental, is exactly what an adversary intelligence service would want. What does 14 sources burned look like in reality? The title of this video mentions 14 sources burned. Let's spend a moment being absolutely precise about what that means and what it means in reality for the people involved, based on everything we've documented today. In the Mariam Thompson case alone, the DOJ confirmed the identities of at least 8 clandestine human assets were compromised, along with at least 10 U.S. targets and multiple tactics, techniques, and procedures. Wikipedia, in a separate filing, when she was arrested by the FBI on February 27, 2020, Thompson had shared with her co-conspirator the identities of at least 10 clandestine human assets and at least 20 U.S. targets. Al Jazeera. Different court documents cite slightly different numbers, 8 in some filings, 10 in others, because counting compromised sources depends on exactly which files are attributed to which transmissions. Regardless of the exact count, the scale of damage is documented and severe. Each of those human sources wasn't just a name on a list. Each was a person who had agreed to work with U.S. intelligence, often inside Iranian-controlled communities or networks, at enormous personal risk. When their names got handed to a Hezbollah operative, who then forwarded them toward the IRGC's revenge network, the people hunting the Americans who killed Soleimani, the risk to each of those individuals became existential. Their exposure, the exposure of their families, and the exposure of the operations they were supporting all happened in a matter of weeks. Now layer on top of that What happens when CI-12 itself gets gutted, when the agents who manage confidential informants inside the Iranian community in the US are abruptly fired. A source with direct knowledge described it as devastating to the FBI's Iran program, warning that the confidential informants those agents developed will go away. The source emphasized that the CIA cannot operate domestically. It is only the FBI that has a robust intelligence program in the US. LinkedIn. Put those two things together, a documented insider burning named sources, and then years later the entire unit tracking IRGC operations being dismantled, and the picture that emerges is of a counterintelligence capability that has been systematically damaged from multiple directions. Whether that damage was coordinated or coincidental is the $64 million question. And it's one that, right now, no one outside of a classified briefing room can definitively answer. A Pentagon linguist with top-secret clearance exposed 8 U.S. sources for an Iran-Hezbollah network and received 23 years in prison. An Air Force intelligence specialist defected to Iran. An FAA contractor was indicted as an Iranian agent. Meanwhile, IRGC hackers targeted U.S. officials. Authorities say the full extent of the damage remains unknown. Given everything you just heard today, do you think America's counterintelligence capabilities are strong enough to handle an emboldened Iran right now, or is the damage already done? Drop your answer below and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter of this story.